Major Isabel Navarro, you are hereby relieved of flight status. Your reckless disobedience endangers this entire squadron. Those were the words that stripped her of the sky. Isabel stayed silent, fists clenched, walking away as her F-35 gathered dust in the hangar. Yet she carried the weight of 12 soldiers alive because of her choice. They cast her aside. But destiny was not done with Isabel Navarro. And when two generals were trapped behind enemy lines, only one pilot dared to attempt the impossible. Major Isabel Navarro, diving her F-35 through a canyon so narrow it was thought impassable. One wrong move meant death, yet one perfect strike meant saving the nation's leaders. Was she reckless? Or was she the only one who understood that rules don't win wars? Courage does. Major Isabel Navarro was once the star of the skies. Every squadron has its prodigy, the one pilot others quietly measure themselves against, the one who makes the impossible look effortless. For years, that was Isabel. Her name carried weight on the flight line. In the simulator, she shattered records. In the air, her instincts were uncanny, as though she could read the battlefield before the enemy even moved. Her call sign, whispered with both admiration and envy, wasn't just about skill, it was about daring. The way she took the F-35 beyond what even its designers imagined. And for a while, that daring was celebrated. She was the one commanders sent when the margin for error was zero. She was the one her fellow pilots wanted on their wing. But in the military, the same qualities that make you brilliant can also make you dangerous. The fall began in a barren stretch of Syria, a mission that was supposed to be routine. Intelligence suggested light resistance in the valley where Alpha Squad was running reconnaissance. Yet as any soldier knows, routine is often the most dangerous word in the field. What Alpha Squad actually walked into was a carefully staged ambush. Dozens of enemy fighters entrenched on higher ground rained fire down on 12 Americans pinned against bare rock with nowhere to go. Protocol demanded patience. The standard playbook said, hold position, call for artillery support, and wait. Reinforcements were 20 minutes out. The problem? Alpha Squad didn't have 20 minutes. Their cover was crumbling, their ammunition running low. They were minutes away from being overrun. Isabel saw it unfolding from above. From her patrol route, she had a perfect view, and a terrible choice. If she followed orders, she would watch 12 soldiers die in real time. If she broke formation, defied command, and trusted her instincts, maybe, just maybe, she could change the outcome. She chose the latter. Diving into the valley at angles no flight manual recommended, she pulled the F-35 into a maneuver that risked everything. Her life, her aircraft, and her career. With precision strikes skimming just meters from friendly positions, she cut the ambush apart piece by piece. Enemy fire that should have ended Alpha Squad's lives instead became silent craters smoking in the sand. When the dust cleared, 12 soldiers walked out alive. 12 families would welcome them home, and Isabel Navarro's career was over. Back at base, there was no medal ceremony, no handshake, no well done. Instead, Colonel Harris's voice was cold and final. Major Isabel Navarro, you are hereby relieved of flight status. Your reckless disobedience endangers this entire squadron. Those words cut deeper than any shrapnel. In one stroke, the skies, her home, her purpose, were stripped away. The F-35 that had been her partner in the most daring maneuver of her career was wheeled into Hangar 7 and left under covers, dust collecting where once there had been fire and thunder. Isabel could only watch from the observation deck as others climbed into their jets, while hers sat silent. And silence for a pilot is the cruelest punishment. Pilots are a tight fraternity, bound by trust, yet trust is fragile. Once branded reckless, Isabel became radioactive. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Eyes looked past her as though she were invisible. No one wanted to be seen siding with the woman under review. No one, except Lieutenant Commander Dana Scott. Dana was different. A friend, yes. But more than that, she was a believer in Isabel's judgment. She had been watching from the squadron deck that day in Syria, watching the feed, and she knew the truth. If Isabel hadn't broken orders, Alpha Squad would be dead. Their conversations, stolen over coffee or whispered by the railing, kept Isabel tethered to hope. Dana would say things like, "Some of us know you did what had to be done. Don't let them write your story for you." But words of loyalty, while comforting, could not erase the weight pressing down on Isabel. Isabel's fall wasn't just about a pilot punished for breaking orders. It was a mirror of life itself. History shows us that innovators are often punished not for failing, but for succeeding differently. In business, in schools, in medicine, those who dare to defy the script are branded reckless before they're proven right. Society craves results, yet fears the rule breakers who deliver them. And Isabel Navarro became the living proof of that paradox. So as Act 1 closes, we see her, standing alone on the deck, her gaze fixed on the horizon where jets streak across the sky without her. Her fists are clenched, her heart heavy, but her resolve, though bruised, is unbroken. She has saved 12 lives, but lost her wings. She has proven herself right, but been declared wrong. And somewhere, deep down, she knows this is not the end. Because for a pilot like Isabel Navarro, the sky always calls back. The call came just before dawn, shattering the uneasy quiet of the base. A voice over the intercom, clipped and urgent, summoned every available pilot to the briefing room. Isabel Navarro froze in place as the announcement echoed through the halls. She wasn't supposed to be included. She wasn't on flight status. Yet the sergeant who passed by confirmed it with a nod. "Colonel Harris wants you there. Now." 3 weeks of silence, of watching others fly while she remained grounded, had ended in a single summons. Isabel grabbed her flight jacket and strode toward the command building, her pulse quickening. Something catastrophic must have happened. The room was packed when she arrived. Pilots in flight suits, intelligence officers hunched over laptops, mission planners tracing lines across maps. The air buzzed with urgency, but also with fear. At the front, Colonel Harris stood stone-faced, his hands clasped behind his back. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began without preamble, "we are facing a crisis unlike any in recent memory. At 0347 hours, a diplomatic convoy moving through Kandahar province was ambushed. 2 of our most senior leaders were captured." He clicked a remote, and the main screen lit up with satellite images. A convoy of burned-out vehicles, black smoke curling into the sky. Red markers indicated hostile positions. The captured individuals are General Patricia Coleman, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Michael Richardson, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander. The room erupted in murmurs. Isabel felt her chest tighten. Losing one general would be disastrous. Losing both, unthinkable. The enemy wouldn't just hold hostages. They would hold symbols of Western power. Harris raised his voice. "We have attempted multiple rescue operations. 2 helicopters down, 1 F-16 lost. Every approach has been blocked by advanced surface-to-air missile systems and fortified defenses. So far, every effort has failed." The pilots exchanged grim looks. They all knew what that meant. Any conventional rescue attempt would end in more deaths. As the screen zoomed in on the compound, Isabel noticed something. A narrow canyon, running parallel to the valley where the enemy had fortified. It was unmarked on the briefing slides, dismissed as impassable. Yet to her, it stood out like a lifeline. Her hands shot up before she thought better of it. "Sir." The room turned. Pilots who had avoided even looking at her for weeks now stared, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. Colonel Harris's eyes narrowed. "Navarro, you have something to add?" "Yes, sir," she said firmly, standing. "These defenses are designed to counter predictable approaches. Jets coming from altitude, helicopters over ridges. But there's a canyon here." She pointed at the eastern edge of the map. "It's narrow, yes, dangerous. But if a pilot used the terrain to mask the approach, we could slip past radar and come up behind their missile nests. Neutralize them before they knew what hit them." A ripple of disbelief spread across the room. Major Stevens, the most decorated pilot present, scoffed aloud. "That's suicide. That canyon's barely wider than an F-35's wingspan. At speed, one mistake, you're paced on the rocks." Isabel met his gaze without flinching. "The margin for error is already zero, Major. If we keep trying the standard playbook, those generals will be executed before sunrise. This is the only path they won't expect." The room fractured. Some pilots leaned forward, intrigued. Others shook their heads. She's reckless. She's grounded for a reason. Maybe reckless is exactly what we need right now. The debate grew heated. One officer slammed his fist on the table. We can't build an operation on wishful thinking. That canyon is a coffin. But another younger pilot muttered, almost to himself, if anyone could pull it off, it's Navarro. The room fell into argument. Strategy clashed with fear, logic with desperation. Isabel stood silently in the storm, letting their words wash over her. She had already made her choice. In her heart, the decision was clear. Colonel Harris finally raised his hand, silencing the room. His eyes locked onto Isabel with the weight of a man who remembered grounding her, stripping her wings, and calling her a danger. Navarro, step outside. The corridor was dim and quiet compared to the chaos inside. Harris closed the door behind them and turned, his voice lower, more deliberate. 3 weeks ago, you violated orders and nearly cost us a squadron. You've been under review ever since. And now you're suggesting a maneuver so reckless it borders on insanity. He paused, his face hard. Tell me the truth, Navarro. That stunt you pulled in Syria, did you do it to save those men or to show off? The question hit her like a punch. She had replayed that mission 100 times, asking herself the same thing. But now, face to face with the man who had exiled her from the skies, she answered without hesitation. Sir, Alpha Squad was minutes away from being wiped out. Artillery support was 20 minutes out. They didn't have 20 minutes. That maneuver was the only way to save them. It wasn't ego, it was survival. And I would do it again. Harris's expression didn't soften, but his eyes searched hers for cracks. And this canyon run? Do you honestly believe you can fly it and live? I can't guarantee my survival, sir, Isabel admitted. Her voice was steady. But I can guarantee that if no one tries, those generals won't survive either. Someone has to do it. And I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 weeks. I know this aircraft. I know what it can do. And I know what I can do. Shawarni, for a long moment, the colonel said nothing. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. If she failed, the blame would fall not only on her, but on him. If she succeeded, 2 generals would live, and perhaps the military itself would regain its footing. Finally, Harris exhaled. If I let you do this and you fail, you'll drag us both into court-martial. Isabel didn't blink. If you don't let me try, those generals are already dead. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was the silence of a decision being made. Harris straightened, his jaw set. Very well. Prepare your aircraft. At that moment, Isabel Navarro became the embodiment of a question bigger than the mission. When does courage become recklessness? And who decides? Rules exist to protect us. Protocols are written in blood, the lessons of those who came before. But rules also have limits. They cannot predict every battlefield, every crisis, every human choice. Sometimes survival requires stepping beyond the edge of certainty. If she failed, Isabel would be remembered as reckless. If she succeeded, she would be remembered as heroic. But the truth was, in that moment before the outcome, she was both reckless and heroic, a paradox in flight gear. And with the lives of 2 generals at stake, the world would soon find out which one she truly was. The hangar was alive with motion. For 3 long weeks, Isabel Navarro had walked past her F-35 Lightning II, its frame hidden beneath tarps. Dust settling like an accusation. Now, at last, the covers had been stripped away. Ground crews swarmed over it with frantic precision, refueling, rearming, checking systems. The jet gleamed under the floodlights as if it had been waiting for this night. Chief Mechanic Rodriguez, a grizzled veteran who treated the aircraft like family, caught her eye as she approached. Wiping his hands on a rag, he grinned. Lines of exhaustion carved deep into his face. Captain, this iron bird has been waiting 3 weeks for you, he said, voice rough but warm. Isabel paused, running her gloved hand along the cool surface of the fuselage. The machine was more than metal and circuits. To her, it was memory, freedom, and purpose. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "So have I." Climbing the ladder and lowering herself into the cockpit felt like coming home. The seat cradled her like an old friend, the harness straps pulling tight across her chest. She lowered the helmet over her head and instantly the jet came alive. Displays lit up in a cascade of green and amber, HUD flickering to life with targeting grids and terrain overlays. It was as though the aircraft recognized her return. Every switch, every control, fit perfectly beneath her hands. This was where she belonged, not standing forgotten on the sidelines, but inside the machine that made her whole. The canopy lowered with a hiss. The outside world disappeared. Only the hum of the jet remained. "Ghost 7, you are cleared for immediate departure," came the voice from the tower. "Godspeed, Captain Navarro." She pushed the throttle forward. The F-35 surged down the runway like a caged predator, finally freed, its roar shaking the night. In seconds, the wheels left the ground, and Isabel was airborne again. The flight to the operational zone was 2 hours of silence, broken only by mission updates relayed through her comms. Enemy defenses still strong, generals still alive. Window for rescue closing fast. As the Afghan mountains rose before her, Isabel dropped her altitude, hugging the terrain. She had studied this route for weeks in her mind, replaying every contour, every angle. Now she would live it. "Ghost 7, enemy radar sweep active," Overwatch warned. "Surface-to-air batteries standing by." "Copy," Isabel answered. Her voice was calm, steady. "Beginning canyon ingress." Shamadame, she dove into the canyon, the walls of stone rising high on either side. At near-supersonic speed, the margins were almost non-existent. Her wingtips seemed to brush the rock. Every breath, every twitch of her hand mattered. And then, time changed. For most people, this run would have been terror. For Isabel Navarro, it was clarity. Psychologists call it flow. That rare state where challenge and skill balance so perfectly that action becomes effortless. Awareness narrows. Distractions vanish. You stop flying the jet. You become the jet. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the machine. Every vibration of the fuselage was as clear to her as her own pulse. She was not navigating the canyon. She was threading herself through its veins. Dusk kicked up in her wake. Sunlight sliced across her canopy. Shadows stretched across the cliffs. And still, she moved like water, flowing where the rock demanded. The enemy never expected this. Their missile batteries were aimed skyward, ready for aircraft attacking from altitude. They had not prepared for a ghost rising from the earth itself. Isabel burst out of the canyon behind them. Her targeting reticle glowed red as it locked. "Fox 3, she called, releasing a missile. Explosion. A launcher vanished in flame. "Fox 2. Another missile streaked forward. Another detonation. Within 30 seconds, the air defenses that had destroyed helicopters and F-16s were crumbling. Enemy operators scrambled, firing blindly into the night, but Isabel was already gone, banking and striking again with surgical precision. "Overwatch. SAM sites neutralized," she reported. Her tone was almost casual, as if she'd done nothing more than practice drills. "Air corridors clear." "Rescue 1, proceed," Overwatch ordered. On the horizon, helicopters appeared, black silhouettes against the moonlight. They raced toward the compound where the generals were held. Isabel climbed higher, circling above like a hawk protecting its prey. Enemy fire erupted from rooftops and hillsides. RPGs arced upward. Isabel dove, unleashing the F-35's cannon in precise bursts. Tracers ripped through enemy strongholds. She released flares, her bombs carving paths through enemy reinforcements without touching the compound itself. Inside the building, Special Forces breached with silent efficiency. Radio chatter filled her headset. "Rescue 1. We have eyes on the targets." Seconds later, both generals secured, preparing extraction. Isabel's focus sharpened. Reinforcements surged from surrounding ridges, trying to encircle the helicopters. She banked hard, releasing more precision munitions. Explosions split the valley. Dust and fire rose as enemy formations broke apart. "Ghost 7, keep pressure on their eastern flank," Overwatch instructed. "Copy." Isabel dove again, her cannon roaring. Each strike was deliberate, timed to within fractions of a second, neutralizing threats without endangering the friendlies. From below came the confirmation. "Rescue 1, targets secure, departing now." The helicopters lifted, generals aboard. For Isabel, it was the first breath of relief, but the mission wasn't over. She stayed overhead, ensuring no pursuit. Enemy fighters scrambled too late. Isabel dropped one last payload across their staging area, scattering them into retreat. By the time the dust settled, the helicopters were fading into the horizon, carrying the rescued generals toward safety. The compound burned behind her, smoke twisting into the night sky. The defenses were gone, the enemy scattered, and still, Isabel's mind was quiet. The flow had not left her. Machine and pilot moved as one until, finally, Overwatch's voice came through. Ghost 7 extraction successful. Mission complete. You are cleared to return to base. Purum. To the outside world, it looked impossible. Reckless, insane. But to Isabel Navarro, it felt inevitable. This is the paradox of the flow state. From the inside, the impossible becomes natural. Every motion is certain, every decision precise. Athletes feel it on the field, surgeons in the operating room, musicians in performance. For Isabel, it was flying a jet through a canyon no one else dared attempt. Was she reckless? Or was she simply the only one capable of becoming the machine at the exact moment when survival demanded it? As Isabel guided her jet back toward friendly airspace, the weight of the mission settled in. She had saved 2 generals, dismantled an entire defense network, and proven herself in a way no court-martial could ever deny. For 3 weeks, she had been silenced, branded reckless. Tonight, she had answered in the only language that mattered: action. The F-35 thrummed beneath her like a second heartbeat. The sky stretched endlessly ahead. And Isabel Navarro, once grounded, now vindicated, knew that for her, the line between reckless and heroic was not written in rules, but in the courage to act when no one else would. The night was thick with silence as Isabel guided her F-35 on a final approach. The mission was over. The generals were safe. The compound burned behind her, a smear of smoke in the distance. Yet her heart beat in rhythm with the engine, steady and controlled, as if refusing to let go of the flow she had lived inside for the last hour. Ghost 7, cleared to land, the tower's voice broke through. She lowered the landing gear, the screech of hydraulics sharp in her headset. The runway lights gleamed like a string of stars pulling her home. When the wheels kissed the tarmac, the jet rolled with smooth precision until it slowed to a crawl. Isabel pulled the throttle back, the roar of the engine fading into a low hum. The silence that followed was deafening. As her canopy lifted, Isabel looked down. The entire squadron was there. Pilots in flight suits, mechanics with arms folded, junior officers standing stiffly at attention. No cheers, no applause, just silence. They had doubted her. Some had mocked her. Others had treated her like a ghost, grounded and forgotten. Now every pair of eyes was fixed on her as she climbed down the ladder. Helmet under her arm, boots striking the tarmac, she walked forward into their stairs. Her own footsteps seemed louder than the roar of the F-35 had been. Lieutenant Commander Dana Scott was the first to move. She broke ranks, offering a subtle nod and the faintest smile. Not the smile of surprise, but of vindication. Isabel returned it with a small glance, grateful for the one ally who had believed even in exile. Colonel Harris stepped out from the line. His face, as always, was unreadable, carved from stone. He stopped just a few feet from her, letting the silence stretch until the tension was unbearable. Then in his clipped, commanding voice he spoke. "Mission report, Captain." Isabel straightened. 2 targets extracted successfully. Enemy defenses neutralized. Extraction team airborne and secure. Minimal friendly losses. Harris nodded once. Then he raised his voice for all to hear. Effective immediately, Major Isabel Navarro's disciplinary review is concluded. Flight status restored. Commendation for exceptional performance under extraordinary conditions to be submitted. A wave of murmurs rippled through the squadron. Isabel's chest tightened. Not with triumph, but with relief. The wings taken from her had been returned. Yet Harris's expression didn't soften. "But," he continued, and the murmurs stilled again, "let this stand as a reminder. Innovation, creativity, audacity, they all have their place, but they must live beside responsibility. The line between reckless and heroic is razor thin, and too often it is only drawn after the fact." Our duty is to walk that line without forgetting which side we serve. His gaze drilled into her. Do you understand, Navarro? Isabel met his eyes and nodded. Yes, sir. But sometimes the only way to keep that line intact is to cross it. For the briefest second, Harris's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite disapproval. Then he stepped back. The squadron began to approach. Major Stevens, who had scoffed at her canyon plan, stopped in front of her. For a moment, Isabel thought he might sneer again. Instead, he extended his hand. You pulled off the impossible, he admitted. I was wrong. She shook his hand without a word. Around her, others offered nods, salutes, quiet acknowledgments. No one shouted. No one cheered. Respect returned slowly, carefully, as if they were all still reconciling the woman they had once called reckless with the one who had just saved two generals. This is where Isabel's story pierces deeper than one mission. Because her flight wasn't just a victory in the sky, it was a mirror of how society judges risk. When someone defies the rules and fails, we call them reckless. When they defy the rules and succeed, we call them heroic. The cruel truth is that, in the moment before the outcome, they are both. The firefighter who rushes into a collapsing building against orders. The doctor who tries an unapproved treatment on a patient with no other hope. The engineer who abandons protocol to solve a crisis in real time. All of them dance on that same razor's edge. What separates recklessness from heroism? Not intent, not courage. Often, it is only the result. Fail and you are condemned. Succeed and you are praised. But in the heart of the act, you are both. Isabel Navarro was proof of this paradox. 3 weeks ago, she was the grounded pilot, the example of what happens when you put instinct above command. Tonight, she was the savior of the Allied Command's highest leaders. The only difference was the outcome. Later, when the noise had died down and the squadron had dispersed, Isabel stood alone in the hangar, her F-35 cooling quietly behind her. She placed her hand against the fuselage and closed her eyes. 3 weeks ago, she had been stripped of her wings. Tonight, she had reclaimed them. But she knew Harris was right. The balance between creativity and responsibility, between daring and discipline, was fragile. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't flawless. She was something in between. A pilot who listened to the book until the book could no longer save lives, and then trusted herself to write a new page. As dawn broke over the base, Isabel Navarro's shadow stretched long across the tarmac. She was no longer the pilot grounded for disobedience. She was the pilot who had flown through a canyon thought impossible, destroyed defenses no one else could touch, and returned with lives others had already counted as lost. Her story would echo in briefing rooms, in training manuals, in whispered conversations among new recruits. Some would call her reckless, others heroic. But perhaps the truth was both, and neither. Because in the end, Isabel had shown the world that sometimes the line between recklessness and heroism isn't drawn by rules, but by the courage to act when no one else dares. Major Isabel Navarro's return to the skies became more than just the rescue of two generals. It became a story that spread across the military like wildfire. In a single night, she had transformed from an officer, branded reckless, grounded and sidelined, into the pilot who saved the very heart of the Allied command. Once she had been the cautionary tale, proof of what happened when a pilot ignored protocol. Now she was a symbol, a reminder that courage sometimes demands breaking the very rules designed to keep us safe. The shift was unmistakable. Among her squadron, whispers of doubt gave way to nods of respect. Across the base, her name became synonymous with daring. And in classified reports destined for history books, her mission was recorded as a decisive rescue made possible by precision flying and unconventional tactics. For Isabel, the irony was clear. The same qualities that had nearly ended her career, her willingness to disobey, to improvise, to push the machine beyond the manual, were the very qualities that saved lives. She had become a paradox personified, punished for defiance, honored for results. Isabel's story speaks to more than aviation. It speaks to the way society treats those who refuse to walk the straight line. We often punish rule breakers, not because they fail, but because they succeed differently than expected. Firefighters who defy orders but save civilians. doctors who attempt experimental procedures when time is running out, engineers who ignore design constraints to build something new, entrepreneurs who discard convention to change entire industries. At first, they are told they are reckless, dangerous, unfit, but when their risks succeed, we rename them visionary, hero, pioneer. The truth is uncomfortable but undeniable. Society often fears those who bend the rules, until it desperately needs them. This doesn't mean rules don't matter. In medicine, technology, business, or war, rules provide structure, predictability, and safety. They exist because lives have been lost before. But rules are not infinite. They cannot foresee every crisis, every battlefield, every innovation. The lesson is not blind rebellion. The lesson is discernment, knowing when to follow and when the cost of obedience is greater than the risk of breaking free. Isabel's canyon run wasn't rebellion for its own sake. It was necessity. It was survival. It was the recognition that sometimes courage requires going where the rulebook stops. And now the question turns to you. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing just because you did it too soon, too differently, or too boldly? Maybe it was in a classroom where an unconventional solution was marked wrong. Maybe at work, where speaking up against flawed process earned you criticism. Maybe even in life, where standing apart brought isolation instead of recognition. Isabel's story is for anyone who has felt that weight, for anyone who has carried the sting of being called reckless, only to later prove that daring was the difference between failure and success. So as we close this story, remember, rules protect us, but sometimes they also bind us. The courage to know when to honor them and when to step beyond them is what defines true leadership. Isabel Navarro's name will not only be remembered as the pilot who saved two generals, it will be remembered as the reminder that sometimes the very people cast aside are the ones who carry us all. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever been punished just for doing the right thing too early? I'd love to hear your experiences. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, of hidden strength, of courage mistaken for recklessness, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next story. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes courage begins where the rules end.